So one of the areas we're seeing a lot more interest in is the brand experience, and I think there's a lot of things driving this. HCAP scores are out there, and providers are paying a lot more attention to that stuff now, that essentially their dirty laundry is potentially being aired out in the public. Secondly, with the move toward accountable care organizations, the ability to really hardwire an experience into the whole clinical aspect of things is really going to be very important going forward, especially as we start moving patients into very different models of care from what they're seeing today and what they're experiencing today. And third, frankly, I think we're at a watershed moment in brand development. It's kind of gone beyond kind of branding in a box, where it's about an integrated message, and the things that kind of marketing controls, brochures, collateral, signs, etc., and really about crossing over and making sure that there's substantiation of the brand promise in the actual delivery and organization of services. And I think some of the leading generation VPs of marketing are out there really, making those partnerships with operations happening and helping them to understand, what are the implications of the brand for their operation, and really working with them to kind of bring that insight from the customer to the table, so that they really know, okay, here's how our experience has to be when someone walks into the ER, when someone walks into a clinic. And so that's a huge area where we're seeing a lot more interest and a lot more use of primary research to kind of help shape and define those things. We do something called brand experience mapping, and it's based on a really well-proven interviewing technique called critical incident interviewing. And we'll sit down with very specific segments of patients and go deep into the experience. We'll take a pocket of patients and literally have them review all of the critical aspects, the things that they recall about a particular patient care experience. And what we really try to find out are, what's their kind of emotional mindset? What are the different facets of the experience? What are the different phases as they see it? What's their emotional mindset as they're moving through that? What are their rational needs that they have to feel that, yes, this is progressing effectively? And then what we do is develop an actual map of what that experience looks like. It maps out each phase of the experience, and it helps operations people to essentially conduct a gap analysis between what their experience is like today and what's the ideal from the patient's perspective. And they can literally identify, where do we really need to focus? We did this with a large multi-specialty group up in Minnesota, and we saw an increase in about a year's time in patient satisfaction scores from the 25th to somewhere around the 75th percentile, simply by auditing and making changes. These changes were all based on what are those rational and emotional needs that patients have as they move through each facet of the experience.
Where does that then intersect with marketing and brand development?
What we've found in doing these critical incident interviews is that the things that people are telling us that are absolutely critical to them, the rational and emotional factors, they drive toward the core values that consumers have when it comes to their health care. It's those same core values that I think really strong organizations are basing their brand strategies on. Typically when we start working with a client to build these brand experience maps, it is daunting to think about trying to create that one uniform experience across the continuum. So we try to attack it in such a way that you're going to have the most impact in a fairly controlled environment. And there's two categories or two ways in which we'll usually work with clients to figure out how they should do this. One is what I call the high share of encounter services, ED, outpatient, primary care, the core kinds of services that people are using, where frankly you're going to be touching patients' lives more there than anywhere else, and you're going to be forming their impression of your brand based on how you perform in those areas. So usually those are core areas to start with, because that's the biggest bang for the buck. The other areas though are typically strategic services or encounters that I kind of think of as more share of impression: major cardiovascular surgery, having a baby, a high-risk pregnancy, a major orthopedic procedure, the kinds of things that maybe aren't high volume, but in terms of their ability to kind of stay with somebody and really form a deep impression of the brand, they have a huge impact, and they generate huge word of mouth through traditional and social media. Typically we've worked with organizations after they establish a brand position, then it's the next phase of that is, all right, how do you put it into action? And a lot of times that's where we'll start doing some of the experience mapping, because we know what the position we want to have is. We know what our intent is. Now we need to figure out what does that experience need to look like in order for it to come alive for patients. And so typically it's something that follows the brand strategy development process. I think it's great, you know, if agencies and other partners can actually use this information, because I think it gives them a richness and depth when they get into message strategy development that allows them to kind of connect with people on that emotional level, particularly as it relates to what kind of experience they have. If you look at what's the #1 driver of quality, you know, from my perspective, listening to consumers, it's not the HCAPs and the awards and all of that stuff and all the technology. It's the ability to deliver on a coordinated experience of care, time and time and time again. That's what consumers tell us.